We're here to talk about a variety of things to do with internet connection today. Before we get started on that one, I just wanted to cast our minds back a second and talk about the $71 million grant that was granted by the federal government to improve cell phone connectivity in the region. What's happened since then, and what's the timeline for those changes?
So the $71 million grant, again in partnership with the Eastern Ontario Regional Network, that announcement was made on July 4th of 2019. Now they have gone through RFP, and it's up to the Eastern Ontario Regional Network to decide who will be the players, who will build more towers, who will build more capacity on those towers. And from my understanding is that project is well underway, but I can't tell you how many towers they've been built. I'd have to ask the Eastern Ontario Regional Network. But that was part of my role in from 2015 to 2019. Again, working in collaboration with the United Counties and all 13 United Counties across Eastern Ontario. They said access to cell phone is a major issue. Let's all work together, and we did. The federal government provided 1/3 of the costs. The provincial government provided 1/3 of the cost, and the other 1/3 came from the private sector. And that's something that it seems to, for me, anyways, it seems to be a working model. And if there's one thing I know is driving across the riding, driving in between cornfields, its cell phone network and access has been on a downward spiral. And again, because technology changes and it's just not talking on the phone anymore, we're streaming, we're live streaming stuff on our cell phones. And I can't tell you how many dropped calls I would get. And I know that what EORN is doing, building more towers, but also laying down the foundation for eventually getting to 5G at some point.
Wonderful. That's absolutely fantastic to hear that progress has made some steps forward at the very least. But Monsieur Drouin, regarding the proposed internet changes, which is what we're here to talk about today, what kind of funding are you seeking this time around? And realistically, how likely do you think that's going to be approved? And have you been told how much these upgrades are going to cost by the EORN?
Yes, so obviously they do all the analysis, and we were looking at either a 50 Mbps to 10 upload, a 5010 connection, and I remember still having this conversation in May, and we said, well, they're telling us to go big or go home. So let's go for the 1 gig. And they estimated that it would cost between $1.2 and $1.6 billion. The unique thing about the EORN model is that it allows us to, the federal government, they're looking for approximately $200 million. They'll be looking for $200 million from the province. And the Canada Infrastructure Bank, which was created a few years back, will be loaning at very low interest, $400 million. And this would allow, and the rest of the dollars will come from the private sector. So the Bell, the Rogers, the Telesis of the world, and other smaller ISP should they choose to apply. And that will allow EORN to provide up to 95% of residents in Eastern Ontario. That's excluding Ottawa.
And you're saying there that obviously funding is coming from a variety of different places, including the private sector. Is this going to affect the cost on the consumer side?
No, because it actually it reduces the amount of investments that the private sector needs to make. And I know there's some folks out there saying, well, why is the government investing there? Well, when it's up to the private sector to do that. Well, the return on investment is not there. We simply do not have enough residents that live in rural Canada for the Bells and the Rogers and the Telesis of the world to allow them to make those particular investments. And it's not unique to Canada. It's the same thing in the States. And I've had some great chats with folks in the States. It's the same story down there. So we need to provide an incentive for them to make the investments. So the government of Canada and governments in general are not investing 100% of the dollars or taxpayer dollars. We're only investing about 1/3. And this allows companies to say, okay, well, now the return on investment makes sense. We will lay fiber down and bring fiber to the home. And, if we wouldn't do that, then we'd still be on dial-up probably in regions in Canada.
And obviously, if you look at Canada compared to a lot of other, especially first world countries, their price per megabit, let's put it at, their price for internet here is very high. So we're not going to see a likely massive increase in cost for consumer packages based on these new changes.
No, and that's a different conversation. But I know that Minister Bain, who's the minister responsible for innovation, science, and economic development, has given a mandate to CRTC, which regulates companies and telecom companies. They've one of the ways to do that is wholesale. So you can buy, because Bell and Rogers, there's a monopoly on who's laying down fiber and who owns the networks in Canada. Well, they have to allow other companies like smaller ISP to rent their equipment. That price of rent on that particular equipment is set by CRTC. CRTC in 2019 issue a wholesale price, and that's a contention issue with smaller ISPs and the bigger players. But CRTC has put their foot down. We are awaiting another decision, but they have decreased their price on the wholesale, which allows other competitors to come into the market and offer better services or better prices to our consumers. But we're working on something like this, and if I don't see prices coming down in Canada, then I will be the first one to say open up the market to other international players. If I don't see proof in the future that prices are coming down, then I don't see a reason why we should protect that monopoly.
Absolutely, and that's good to hear, and that's a topic of conversation where I guess we'll have to put a pin in for now, and something we'll look in a little bit in the coming months. Sticking back to these proposed changes, then when you said about going big or going home, this 1 gigabyte that's being proposed that we're hearing spoken about, is that to do with access or is it to do with speed, and how is it going to affect people's internet speeds at home?
It has to do with speed. So obviously today, nobody needs a 1 gig download speed, but it's all about preparing for the future. And that's why with Eon, we said, well, let's aim for 1 gig. So I can't say that people are going to get a 1 gig download speed tomorrow if the fiber was laid down, because most people don't need that right now. But you will see a major difference in your download speed. So right now, I'm talking to residents that are getting about a 5 megabit download speed, if some of them are lucky. Sometimes they're at 2 or 3. Now they would bring them up to par at either 100 megabits or over 100 megabytes, or even over 100. And when the future, as we see 4K television, 8K live streaming coming online, then that's going to create a huge demand on internet speed. So we will be ready. Fiber will be laid down, and the access will be there. So I think that's an important contention to make with your viewers.
Absolutely, and as you say there, things are going to change as time moves forward. But if we're looking a little bit less into the future here with this particular project right now, what's the kind of timeline we're looking at for these proposed changes? When is the average consumer going to start to see a difference in their broadband speed in their home?
Well, there's two streams to the fund, and actually there's a third component, which is low orbit satellites. But there's the rapid response streaming fund, which is great for companies like Country Wi-Fi in the Clarence Rockland area. And for that, the timeline is within 1 year. You have to build that infrastructure within 1 year. And then there's the bigger projects that the one I'm working with Eorn. Of course, as much as we'd love to lay fiber down across Eastern Ontario, the region I represent is 3,000 square kilometers. Of course, they're not going to lay fiber down within a year. So those projects are going to take a little longer. But as long as they keep laying fiber in the ground, to me, we make an advancements. But we do realize, and I think I've mentioned this before, but for residents, for instance, on Bouvier Road, I've heard multiple times from them that they need access to internet, because right now they simply have no options. So obviously I'd be working with companies like Country Wi-Fi to offer services like that, and hopefully they will make an application and be successful.
And as you say there are 2 streams, and particularly what I want to notice on there is the rapid response stream there. So will these upgrades be equally distributed throughout the region, or is there going to be like a priority list as you just sort of alluded to there?
Well, it will be based on whomever applies, and it will be based on needs. So the proponents can only ask for up to $5 million, and then they look at ratios. Public servants will make the analysis. But obviously for companies, smaller ISPs like Country Wi-Fi and IGS and Hawkesbury, all of the profits that they make, they reinvest it automatically. So I know, and speaking personally with Jeff, that he's looking forward to co-investments, and he's looking forward to lay fiber up, fiber down, and offer better services to residents that, as much as we, Bell or Rogers simply won't go there because the numbers are not there for them, but they work for companies like Country Wi-Fi.
And following this week's announcement, then what's the immediate next steps?
So immediate next steps for me on the rapid response is to make sure that local companies apply, and then I will work with them to follow the application through the process. And then with EORN, the longer intake, again, making sure they apply, making sure they cross the T's and the I's, and making sure their application is successful.
That's grand. Well, thank you very much for your time today, and I look forward to speaking to you a little bit more about this topic in the future.
Great, thank you.